It was a normal day, or at least that's what I thought as I finished my grueling workout. My body, covered in sweat, felt nice, like a fresh, smooth surface after the waves hit. I looked in the mirror and couldn't help but notice how the muscles in my arms and shoulders stood out after working hard. I longed for a long-awaited shower to wash away the weight of exertion. As I stood in the tub, relaxing under the jets of hot water, my head was filled with thoughts of how quickly it could cleanse not only my body, but my soul as well. There was the usual silence in the house since my father had passed away 5 years ago. That silence enveloped me like an old, worn-out blanket, and sometimes I thought it filled the voids his death had left. My mom and sister Laura usually came home later, pulling me into this empty space, as if I were in a time capsule frozen in anticipation of the changes that had taken place. I finished my shower and left the bathroom, forgetting to pick up my workout clothes from the living room. But as I stepped into the hallway, I was suddenly confronted by Laura and my mom. Their eyes, full of surprise, met mine, and I froze. I wasn't prepared for this moment, completely vulnerable, standing in front of them naked as a newborn. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I rushed back to my room, unable to deal with the growing embarrassment that was burning my skin. When the blank door closed behind me, I felt waves of hot embarrassment come over me. I thought this embarrassing incident would fade with time, but the tension only grew more intense with each passing day. Laura began to behave differently, her usual jokes and teasing becoming unbearably persistent. She teased me, and her touch stayed on me a little longer than before, causing a nervousness in me that I didn't know how to deal with. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that it was just a feature of our close relationship. But the anxiety grew with each new look, with each of their touches. A real game was going on between us, and I didn't know how to interpret it. Maybe I was overthinking every gesture. Was it worth turning a trivial sensation into something more? One night when we were together again, something happened that changed everything. Laura teased me, her hand inadvertently touching my shoulder, and I felt sparks run across my skin. I couldn't ignore it any longer. "Laura, really? Come on, that's enough," I blurted out. My voice came out sharper than I wanted it to, and I saw her smile fade before my eyes. I didn't know what I was up to, but something in the atmosphere changed. Her face reflected a surprised challenge. She hadn't expected such a response. "What's wrong?" she asked, and there was a lightness in her voice, but her eyes burned with something deeper. Then she uttered a phrase that made me feel like I'd been hit in the chest. "You're not the only one." Her words sounded soft, as if she was touching a heart that had long needed understanding. "My mom and I feel like we're losing each other, that we can't cope with the loss," she continued. I realized that this tension, this confusion, this uncertainty in the relationship was not just the aftermath of one awkward moment. It was a cry for help. Those words reflected everything I myself was feeling, leaving a deep imprint in my mind. We began a conversation that forced us to open up to each other. My mom, walking into the room, said that since my father's death, she has tried to keep the family together, but at times she feels that we are drifting apart. Those words left a residue. I felt the same pain, the same fear, realizing that our conversation was the point where our thoughts and feelings intersected. I felt the aggravation hidden behind Lara's every glance. Every moment we spent together was filled with electricity, and I couldn't escape the feeling that new boundaries had emerged between us that we both didn't want to break. It had been a week since we'd spent that evening on the couch, but the tension hadn't left our atmosphere. I could feel it thickening, like rain clouds ready to fall in a thunderstorm. Every time Laura touched me, even casually, it caused my body to respond. I began to notice how our gazes lingered a little longer than before, and how the quiet whispers between us became filled with hints of something more. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon and the evening sky turned warm shades of orange and purple, we decided to take a walk in the park. It was a long-time hobby of ours where we could talk about everything and nothing, and it was in that moment, as the light breeze played with our hair, that something inside me broke and I realized how much I missed the closeness, the genuine feelings in our interaction. I stopped, catching a glimpse of Lara in the light of the evening sunset. Her hair framed her face, glowing as if it were glowing in the departing sunlight. I felt a familiar heat inside, stronger than I'd ever felt before, and I couldn't help but reach for her hand, touching her wrist with my fingers. It was a simple touch, but it sent me into a whirlwind of emotions. Lara, as if sensing that impulse, turned around and met my gaze with a look full of question and tenderness. We stood as if time had stopped, and everything around us had disappeared. I didn't know how it happened, but in that moment of confusion I leaned over and touched her cheek with my lips. I felt her shiver in surprise, and then, as if believing in the moment, she closed her eyes. It was a sign of intimacy, a sign that despite the pain of the past, we could create something new. I felt sparks shoot through us and warmth fill our hearts. "What are we doing?" she whispered, opening her eyes. I couldn't find an answer right away, instead taking another step closer. I kissed her lips, and it was like a flash of light in the darkness. Our lips met and the world around us disappeared. The guiltily beautiful kiss became an expression of everything we'd been hiding: the reticence, the pain, the passion. Each touch, each new kiss was a revelation of something we'd both been waiting for, delicate and fragile. I embraced her, feeling her warmth, and in that instant, everything that had once separated us merged into one wave. Lara responded to my touch, hugging me back. She pulled me closer, and I felt our hearts beating in unison. We found ourselves in this new space where there was no room for fear. Every moment became intense: the wind rushing through the trees, the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk that seemed to call us back to life. We were rediscovering each other, and it was beautiful and genuine. That night, we didn't just gather memories of the past. We began to create a new future. We gathered our strength together to embark on a path full of passion and spark, and felt the true connections between us rekindle again. That night, I knew we hadn't just overcome the obstacles of the past. We were stronger than ever. When we returned home, I realized that our hearts were now in unison and our family was ready for a new beginning. We stood together on the edge of a new life, ready to take on any challenge. Each new day promised a sense of unity that was so necessary. And in that unity, I found not only soul mates, but true love, the kind that would never fade away. As I stared at Lara that magical evening, I couldn't help but realize how violently my feelings were changing. Everything I'd experienced over the past few months was swirling together in a whirlwind of emotions, and mentally I kept coming back to that one moment, the kiss that had brought us together. That kiss swirled around in my head like a cloud, keeping my heart pounding faster with every memory. The scene kept replaying in my mind as I slowly leaned into her, her breathing becoming quieter and the world around her seeming to lose its colors. The moment our lips touched, it wasn't just a touch, it was the merging of two souls. I felt her warmth, her tenderness, and every cell in my body reacted to that contact, igniting a fire inside that I hadn't realized was there for a long time. With that thought, I began to realize that I wanted to repeat that kiss, to make it deeper, more passionate. I dreamed of reliving the magic that had enveloped us then. The lightness of her lips, the palpable trembling when I touched her, as if the whole world had turned upside down and there were only the two of us. As I replayed the scene in my head, I could feel how every touch, every gesture had a special meaning. It wasn't just a kiss, it was our story, full of passion, hopes, and fears, and I wanted to capture that moment again with all my tenderness and sincerity. I dreamed that this kiss would be a transmission of everything that had long lain hidden in our hearts. Lara was looking at me, and there was a question in her eyes. She, too, was aware of the tension between us. I saw her lips open slightly, as if inviting me to repeat the moment. Desire was beginning to flare up inside me, like a flame consuming everything around it. I couldn't contain myself. And then, as I leaned into her again, it was as if time had stopped. I could feel every part of her body next to me. All my thoughts ran through my head at that moment, about how much we'd overcome, about how important she was to me, and about how no words could ever convey the range of emotions I felt. I knew I was ready to open my heart to her. When our lips met again, It wasn't just a repetition, it was a new beginning. I put all my feelings into that kiss, all the love that had accumulated over the long months of loneliness and pain. It was a spark that ignited passion. It was a silent cry that we were no longer alone. I felt Lara respond to my kiss, and it only made me more eager to continue. She hugged me so tightly that I felt as if we were one at that moment. I realized that I had received an unforgettable feeling of closeness and connection, and this was just the beginning. I felt a desire within me to continue exploring our memories together, to fill each day with sincere warmth and create new moments that would remain in our memories forever, like that magical kiss under the evening sky.